Okay, so today was OpenAI's Dev Day, and they announced four major things. And I'm going to go through each of those things in this video. And then in future videos, I'll look deeper at each of the things that they've announced. The first, and what I think is by far the biggest announcement that they've made, is this whole concept of a real-time API. So basically, what this is going to give us is the ability to build voice apps that just go directly from our device to their API and basically process the voice and respond in voice as well. So this is going to basically have audio in and audio out. They're calling this the real-time API. It's going to be low latency. And really what this is doing is basically replacing things where people used to use Whisper to transcribe some audio on the fly or an API to do that on the fly. This is going to be direct audio in and audio out for that. Now, it will be able to take text in as well. But one of the cool things that is also coming with this is that this API endpoint is going to exchange messages with GPT-4o, and it's going to support function calling. So literally, you'll be able to speak to the model and tell it that you want to order a pizza. And it's going to, if you've basically set up the function for ordering pizza and what toppings you want, what size you want, that kind of thing, you're going to see it be able to just return back that as a function to your app. So we'll probably see a lot of apps where people are using this for sort of, customer interactions and stuff like that. You could imagine a really cool pizza ordering app where you just have a conversation with it. You tell it about the pizza that you want as it detects automatically what pizza you want to order, what toppings, what size, what your address is, that kind of thing. All of that will get returned in a function call, probably so that you can see it on screen and then just press a button to basically go ahead with the order. This really is a step forward for people building sort of chat interactions, because now those chat interactions are not just going to be limited to text. They're going to be fully voice, and they're also saying that in the future they plan to introduce images and video into this. So you could imagine that you're speaking to some kind of bot where you could show it something that's wrong on your car or ask it about some warning sign and stuff like that. And as you basically beam that video through, that's going to go to the model as well. And as it diagnoses what's wrong, it will be able to send a function call back to your app, which would then allow you to basically tell AA where you are, that kind of thing. Now, one of the cool things is that this is being made available in public beta for all paid developers. So if you've got a developer account already on platform.openai.com, you will be able to use this, but it's not going to be cheap. So they're saying that the prices are going to be, for text tokens, are going to be $5 per million in, 20 per million out. But the audio tokens are where the real price is here. And that's going to be $100 per million tokens in and $200 per million tokens out. Now, this equates to roughly 6 cents per minute of audio in and 24 cents per minute of audio out. But it is certainly going to give you a better response than just transcribing it. Don't forget, this kind of thing can also sort of measure your emotion as you're talking to you. It can do a whole bunch of different things that go beyond just the normal ASR and TTS pipelines in here. So this is something that's really quite amazing. Okay, so the second thing that they announced is the Vision Fine-Tuning API. So basically this allows us to fine-tune GPT-4, not just with text in, text out, but now with images in and images out. So they talk a little bit about how you can do that. It looks like that you're probably going to end up hosting the images yourself somewhere on the web. They will pull them down and use them. And you'll pass it a normal sort of thing where you basically have a system message, you'll have a user message, maybe that's going to be some sort of visual Q&A, you'll pass in the image, and then you'll basically show what the response back should be. Now, they show what a couple of companies that had early access have done to this. So one of them is Grab, which is basically like Asia's version of Uber. The other ones that I found really interesting was this second one. And this is Automat, a company that's building RPA agents. And you can imagine for RPA agents, so RPA is robot process automation, very similar to the early versions of agents. And in many ways, most of these things tended to suck because the machine learning behind them wasn't that good. In this case, you can see that they're basically training it to know exactly where something is on a page to be able to interact with this. Another example that they give is CoFrame, which is doing some kind of web layout and design sort of things. I think we're going to see a lot of really cool uses of this, where you could imagine just feeding in lots of pictures of websites and the Tailwind CSS that was used to make that web design. And you could imagine probably with a few thousand examples or something like that, you're going to end up getting out a model that is a model that could be really good at going from design to implemented HTML and CSS, or maybe something like React with Tailwind, etc. in there. So this one I think is very exciting. I will definitely have a play around with this and look at doing some videos of this in the future. Looking at the pricing for this, I think it's actually quite reasonable. So it's going to be $25 per million tokens for training. And then your inference is going to be $15 per million output tokens. So input tokens, obviously that's where you would input your images. That's going to be $3.75. And then output of where you would actually have the output coming out is going to be $15 per million tokens. The third announcement that they had was basically their version of the prompt caching APIs. So this was introduced by Google earlier on in the year. It was announced at Google I/O. Anthropic has also released prompt caching support for the various Claude models. So in many ways, this is basically just helping OpenAI catch up with what is already out there. And there were a lot of rumors that this is how OpenAI was actually making a lot of its money, was that people were sending in these really long prompts and it was charging for them again and again and again. You can see now with the cached input tokens, basically all the prices are going to be halved for whatever you've got in cache. Now, I think that's not how Google's handling it. You're paying a fee for caching and stuff like that. So it's certainly a good step for people who are using OpenAI, especially with very long contexts where you're basically passing in some docs, perhaps where you're passing in images, etc. The last major announcement that they had is one of the ones that I think is really interesting, and this is model distillation. So one of the things that has been a secret, but perhaps has not been such a secret recently, is that the way that OpenAI has introduced models like the turbo models, where it was GPT 3.5 turbo and stuff like that, usually those things where the model's getting much faster and much cheaper are model distillations. And for example, we saw just last week with Meta, when they released the 1B and the 3B versions of Llama, they were able to distill from the bigger ones, the 8B and the 70B. And this is a technique that's allowed the big companies to make smaller versions of the models that are much faster and maybe not fully as good, but getting very close to the same level. Now, where this becomes really useful is if you want to distill your own version of a model down. So basically fine-tuning from a big model to make a small model. So perhaps you're fine-tuning, taking the outputs of a GPT-4o or an o1 preview, etc., and then putting those into the GPT-4o mini. So you're going to end up with a model that's a lot smaller and perhaps not going to be overall as intelligent as the big model, but for your particular use case, it can then start to learn to get a lot better, just like the bigger models here. So they've introduced a few different parts here. One is the whole idea of storing your completions out there. Also some sort of evals where you can basically test these things, and then fine-tuning the smaller model on these outputs and completions that you've had from the bigger models. So again, this is something that definitely deserves a whole video by itself, and I will certainly be having a play with this over the next week or so. And to go along with this, OpenAI is being more generous with their sort of free tiers, in that we can see you're going to be able to do fine-tunings for free. I think it's up to 1 million free tokens per day on GPT-4o until the end of the month. But even going forward, I think after that, there's still going to be some elements that you could do for free in relation to the evals, etc. And storing your completions is going to be something that's free. Now, you may want to check out the details of that if you're storing them for free, do they have the ability to train on them, etc.? That I'm not sure. There are many ways to do this kind of distillation. So I will be looking into this more to see, okay, do they give details of how they're doing it? What are the qualities of the way that they've chosen to do it, etc.? So overall, just to finish up, while there wasn't a big announcement like a GPT-5 model and stuff like that, and perhaps while there were some things that were missing that we perhaps expected, I certainly thought that they might roll out a router after having talked about it in a few different places. they certainly have made some really cool announcements here that are geared towards the developer community. So by far, the real-time API is one of the interesting ones to play with and to see what we can actually build with that. You got to think that that's going to shake things up a little bit for the orchestration frameworks like LangChain, like Llama Index, in that they're going to need to think of how they're going to handle audio going forward as well as text. Now, I'm really curious also to know, do we actually get a text transcript of the conversation or not? Do we only get audio in, audio out for this? So there are a lot of questions to be answered. I'm going to look at these in future videos and have a play with them. I'd love to hear in the comments what you're most excited about, and then also how you plan to use this in apps, whether that be agents, whether that be standard LLM apps, etc. And as always, if you've got any questions or anything, please put them in the comments below. If you found the video useful, please click like and subscribe, and I will talk to you in the next video. Bye for now.